The What It Takes Radio Company and the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network were proud to present a premiere program. It is Arizona Roundup, coming your way from the mile-high cowboy city of Prescott, Arizona.
Welcome to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum. My special guest today is Dr. Paul Fees. Paul, welcome to the show, and congratulations on your new title here at the museum as Deputy Director of Program.
Thank you. Pleased.
Well, Paul, we're here today to talk a little bit about Sharlot Hall Museum, some of your goals in your new role as Deputy Director of Program, but also about something very exciting that's happened at the museum in the last 60 days, and that is we have been named an Arboretum. And you were kind of on the front end of making that application, so I thought, let's talk a little bit about Sharlot Hall and our beautiful grounds.
4 acres, and now 90 species, distinct species of trees and woody plants, which is the designation, plus 180 varieties of rose. It's a remarkable place. And I started thinking about why didn't we try to be accredited? Why should we be known as an arboretum? When in one of the first interviews I heard you give last year, when you came on as executive director, you swung your arms wide and mentioned our grounds, this arboretum, and I hadn't thought of it as an arboretum before. Started digging and discovered that there is an accreditation system. We probably fit level 2, which in terms of numbers of distinct species and varieties and what they call cultivars, which are human-made varieties on species and varieties. But at the same time, we fulfill those basic professional obligations. We have a truly professional gardener, or horticulturist, our groundskeeper, who took the reins from his predecessor, who was also a master gardener and truly professional in his approach to the trees and the shrubbery and the gardens at Sharlot Hall. So it's actually a fairly long tradition we're building on. Anyway, a 9-page online application and a couple or 3 weeks of holding our breath, and we were accredited.
Well, I think it's fantastic, and the anyone who's spent any time in Arizona or has a perception of Arizona waiting to come and visit our beautiful state, there is a perception that we are a desert wasteland or hundreds of miles in every direction of just sand and cactus. And those of us who appreciate the desert, our varied climate from close to close to sea level to over 12,000 feet, realize that Arizona is one of the most diverse states for flora and fauna in the lower 48, and that when you travel and tour the state of Arizona, by being named an arboretum, we stand now with Boyce Thompson Arboretum near Superior, with the Flagstaff Arboretum, the Desert Botanical Gardens of Tempe, Phoenix, and we think about ourselves also as a reflection of our community that has developed and built our community here in Yavapai County, and what that arboretum reflects of the settlement here in Prescott and the diversity in our natural fauna that surrounds us here every day and inspires us here in the Prescott area.
You mentioned people's conception of Arizona as a desert landscape. And yet, you no doubt had something to do with that. You worked for a number of years early in your career for Arizona Highways. And as a longtime subscriber to Arizona Highways, I know that they had features on the canyons up here and the forests and the Mogollon Rim and other parts of Arizona that are not so typical. But what everyone remembers from Arizona Highways is the desert sunsets.
And Monument Valley and Sedona, the Red Rocks of Sedona, and the beautiful monuments of the Four Corners of the Navajo Reservation and up in the Monument Valley. And we actually, there was 2 special editions that we did at Arizona Highways in the 1990s. One was all 50 states in Arizona. We went out of our way and they sent out a call to photographers, and we found photos that would somehow resemble or inspire people thinking of their home state outside of Arizona. And then we went one step further, and we did an international comparison of Arizona's geography and geographic wonders and its natural surroundings and its variety.
And the birds, the variety of birds, the variety of fauna, yes.
We live in a very remarkable state, and for us to be named an Arboretum allows people as they organize their travel and their tour of the state to come and pause and visit our museum and see it from another perspective. We also have, amongst the native trees and plants here on campus, also fruit trees that were brought here by pioneers, including Sharlot Hall herself.
Well, we have other kinds of trees that were introduced in Arizona, such as the London plane tree, which is related to the sycamore, the American sycamore, but which have grown here successfully, which were introduced by, as you say, pioneers, by professional orchardists, by families who tried to bring their home gardens into this landscape. And it's done very well here because Prescott does have a temperate climate with plenty of moisture and certainly a reasonably mild winter. When my wife and I were first here a couple of years ago, it was a very hot summer day, and she remarked on what an oasis this campus seemed to be, a green oasis in the middle of this hot city. And I thought, though, as a historian, my job should be to try to make this place look the way it did when Governor Goodwin and Richard McCormick were having that log building built for themselves. In other words, kind of a shrubby wasteland. And I soon came to realize that that's not in keeping with either the spirit of Sharlot Hall herself or with what we've tried to make of our environment. We as a people, from the very earliest settlers to the East Coast and West Coast, we as a people have tried to make our environment better than what it was, better than what we found it. And sometimes that's destructive in trying to make a land productive in a way that it's not meant to be productive. We can destroy what is good and native there. But what we've done here on this campus, and what actually the pioneers you were talking about who brought orchards and other kinds of plantings to this area, what we've accomplished though is to use the campus, to use the land to its potential, to show what is possible with the variety of flora and the different seasonal type landscapes we have here. It is a remarkable place, and Prescott is probably the best climate in this state for demonstrating all of the kinds of Arizona flora that we do showcase here.
Well, thank you, Paul. We're going to take a quick break here and thank our sponsors, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Sharlot Hall herself and how her parents tried to bring a little bit of Kansas to Central Arizona, and how they can, and what people can discover when they come to our campus. Since 2007, Pinion Painting has been transforming homes and businesses with over 40 years of first-hand experience. In Prescott, they bring superior craftsmanship and an eye for detail to every project, making your vision a reality, hassle-free. Your time is precious. Trust Pinion Painting to get it right the first time. Visit Pinion Painting today and let them transform your space on the web at pinionpainting.com. That's pinionpainting.com. Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook, and my special guest today is Dr. Paul Fees, the Deputy Director of Program at Sharlot Hall. And today we're talking about Sharlot Hall Museum's Arboretum. And when we talk about our Arboretum, we should also talk a little bit about Sharlot Hall herself and how, and her parents, and what brought them out from Kansas. They lived in Lincoln County, Kansas, somewhere out in the central third of the state and windswept plains of Kansas. And some of the dreams they brought with them here, and one of those dreams was to grow fruit orchards along the banks of where they settled, which is along the banks of Lynx Creek and the Agua Fria. Paul, can people, when they come to see our Arboretum and visit our museum, can they see some of that of Charlotte's family history here on the museum campus?
Well, they certainly see some of the family history. Her father first tried mining along the Lynx Creek, that kind of crude surface mining that was actually fairly destructive, before they settled on planting fruit trees along Lynx Creek, and then down at the Orchard Ranch. They also have a chance, visitors to the campus, of seeing 2 or 3 trees that may well have been planted by Sharlot herself. One of those is an apple tree outside the building we call the Sharlot Hall building, that probably was brought to the Orchard Ranch from Utah, or at least it's a cutting from it. And it has survived here since the early 40s. And very likely was planted perhaps by accident by Sharlot. But it's a variety, an old variety of apple that thrived here. There's also a fabulous London plane tree, a huge tree which could live to be 300 years old, and maybe 100 years old now, but probably was planted by Sharlot in front of the governor's mansion. But the whole campus reflects her idea of making this campus a reflection of pioneer Prescott area, of pioneer Arizona in general, including the sorts of things that people found when they came to this place before they had a chance to plant their own plants or grow their own flowers. One of the distinctive features on campus is a garden that was developed in conjunction, in cooperation with the Yavapai Prescott tribe, the ethnobotany garden.
Oh yeah, it's a favorite spot on campus.
Oh, it is, and should be. It's also quite educational, the sorts of things that the people who were indigenous to this area, the kinds of things that they saw in the landscape, the plants they used for medicinal reasons or for food. And also, we also are, of course, showing sort of the desert landscape in a sense, with the rocks and the gravel of that ethnobotany garden. But it's a beautiful thing. It's spare in a way that our rose garden is not, but at the same time it's evocative of early Arizona. She wanted this campus to have a selection of the buildings that reflected early Prescott, but also the landscape that she knew and that she helped alter with her orchard.
And that's one reason we also have a pioneer garden adjacent to the ranch house or the Fort Misery.
Right. With what do they call legacy seeds that provide tomatoes that are unlike the tomatoes you're going to get in the supermarket these days, with possibly even eggplants that look like eggplants that gave them their name. They're white instead of purple. It's a remarkable place.
Well, when people come to campus here and they want to tour the Arboretum, are we going to be developing a map that has kind of a listing of the fauna on campus that they can, the flora and the fauna that they might see on campus? I know that developing a list of wildlife on campus is probably ongoing. We know we have a couple of roadrunners that live on campus and maybe an occasional skunk or raccoon or squirrel. The fences seem to keep the deer out, but when it comes to our flora on campus, I know we're developing a guide to our rose garden and developing some tourism and some greater publicity on our territorial rose garden, but when it comes to walking the campus and learning about the trees and the flowering shrubs and everything on campus, will we be developing a map on that?
Our groundskeeper, Josh Nomlin, working with his predecessor, the previous groundskeeper, Steve Whitley, the two of them have developed a map with the locations of the trees and woody plants, the perennials. We're trying to turn that into a usable guide. There are so many plants. We have 400 trees and shrubs on this campus. It's not just the 80 species, but it's the varieties,
right,
and multiples of those species.
Like the hollyhocks.
Like the hollyhocks, which incidentally came up from Mexico, presumably with soldiers and others, alongside the iris, which came here with Texas pioneers back in the 19th century, or the ivy that came from a cutting at Blarney Castle, Dublin. We have an international garden here, but yes, the map is highly detailed and will become, I think, really of high interest to people touring the campus, and they'll be able to identify what they see in front of them with an inventory of those plants. Also, Steve and now Josh have been putting labels by the distinctive plantings so that people can see the Latin name and popular names for many of the plants.
Well, one of the interesting aspects of that map and being able to publicize ourselves as an arboretum is also being able to watch the changes of the seasons. Because we have fairly distinctive seasons here in Prescott at our mile high altitude, you really can watch. You're on campus regularly. You can watch the seasons change here so visibly, and how they change with the weather, the drought or no drought, rain and snow, but also as the trees bud out and the flowers bloom. It really is quite an experience to be on campus.
It is. There's a woody shrub called a serviceberry. You may have heard of the book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, The Serviceberry. And finding that we had one, by seeing it on the map, I became fascinated and went to take a look at it. It was bare. It was wintertime, nothing there. So I've been watching it every day, going by that serviceberry to see what's happening. Yes, it's going to be beautiful. The roses are budding out. The trees are budding out. The ash are the last trees to give up their suspicion that another frost is coming, but even they're beginning to bud out.
Well, we're going to take another break here and thank our sponsors, and we're going to be right back with Paul Fees as we talk about our Arboretum at Sharlot Hall Museum. Since 1995, Helken & Horn Ad Agency in Prescott, Arizona has helped local businesses stand out and succeed. From print and radio to websites and social media, their talented team crafts your brand's message and offers a plan to get it out into the community. Want results backed by 30 years of experience? Visit azadagency.com today. Helkin and Horn, where their slogan is "Be Known." This is Stuart Rosebrook at Arizona Roundup at Sharlot Hall Museum with Paul Fees, our Deputy Director of Program, and we're talking about our Arboretum here in Sharlot Hall and the importance of her legacy and why becoming an Arboretum is so important to us. And if you read Charlotte's writings, and what inspires me to read her prose and her poetry is that, like, some of our great writers of that era, look at Henry David Thoreau, and we think about the ideas about writing about nature, and Walt Whitman, and where you can be inspired by. Why Sharlot Hall, I think, should be, like we're elevating the importance of our Arboretum. Her writings were very sophisticated for her era. I think she gets overlooked, and she wrote a lot about nature in her essays and in her poetry. Have you come across some quotes from Charlotte about her love of nature and why the gardens and the grounds here were so important to her historically?
She wrote about nature extensively. She wrote about the pine trees and how Prescott is a place where you could look up and see the tops of pine trees scratching the stars. So she wrote poetically. But she also wrote quite realistically about nature. Interestingly, my wife Nancy suggested that she had named, or her mother had named, Orchard Ranch after the orchard house of Little Women. And undoubtedly, she and her mother had read Little Women. It was a runaway bestseller in the mid-19th century and is still in print. So she had that literary foundation for appreciating nature in the first place. As she looked at what she hoped to make of the grounds here, she said at one point she wanted to make the grounds a little park of northern Arizona trees, shrubs, and flowers. And by golly, she did that.
Most definitely.
Oh.
And I think that's one of the things is as people come to visit our campus and we invite them here to enjoy our grounds and our Arboretum, we have a lot of spaces around the campus for reflection, whether you're a member, a new member, or just a guest. We invite you as you go in and out of our buildings and enjoy exhibits and learning about our great Arizona history here in Central Arizona, that you take some time to pause in a cool place on campus and just listen to our wildlife and enjoy the beauty of that campus that Charlotte had envisioned so many years ago.
Sit by the pond that she built near the windmill, in which she kept her pet turtle and goldfish. Yes, find a shady spot and just contemplate it. She was a visionary, and seeing the greenness here, I think, inspired a great deal of what she wrote about her experiences, but also about Arizona. Certainly, she recognized that Arizona was unique in the lower 48, and she wanted to ensure that people appreciated the uniqueness that she saw in the state and its landscape.
One of the things that you mentioned early on is, as I've visualized Sharlot Hall Museum's grounds as an arboretum, I'll just share an anecdote with you that I think that those who have spent time across all corners of the United States, but especially in the West, and I've spent a lot of time at local ranches here across Yavapai County, including the Orm Ranch, and my wife's family, as well as my mother's family, are from Wyoming. And one thing that connects ranches across the West, especially with the role of women in the West, is if the men were working out distance from the homestead, whether in cattle or large acreages of farming, the little oasis that ranch women and farm women were in charge of, that they brought with them an aesthetic of beauty, of home, that they tried to build around that family home. And my experience at the Orme Ranch was that there was a small arboretum built there, plantings for practicality of cottonwoods and sycamores and ashes and desert willows too, and then walnuts and then fruit trees to shade and provide sustenance.
Yeah,
and
not to mention the vegetable gardens.
And then the vegetable gardens and the beauty. And it was the women who were in charge of that landscape around the house, where they planted fruit trees and elderberry and flowers and vegetables, and the kids learned their chores. And Minna Orme, who's in the Women's Hall of Fame, who is a peer of Grace Sparks and Sharlot Hall, she was a botanist from Stanford, and she brought with her this passion for experimenting with flora of all types, like Sharlot Hall. And I just have to imagine that in the 1920s and 1930s, many years after pioneers came to Yavapai County, there was a shared knowledge that people shared, as that ranch women, whether it was through the Yavapai County cowbells or through their church or through their little neighborhood of ranches, that they shared information on how's your apricots doing this year, how is your garden growing this year, and sharing of fruits and vegetables, which I think one of the things we're doing very interestingly here at our museum is that we gather those seeds from our pioneer garden, from the ethnobotanical garden, and from our flowers on campus, and we have those seeds for sale in our Bashford House gift shop.
Right. One of the things that is important to our groundskeeper is gathering up those legacy seeds, especially, and documenting them. That's part of being an arboretum, is being able to tell where they came from and how they've evolved over time. That's an interesting observation about women creating that oasis, that garden around the homes. And the practical side of it, of course, as you were saying, and the aesthetic side. I mean, whatever the reason is there to grow irises except to bring color into the home. I hadn't thought of that being part of what drove Sharlot in her vision of what to do with the governor's mansion. But boy, that's certainly what she accomplished.
Well, my travels around the West, and as you drive into many legacy ranches, small homesteads back in the mountains, whether in Wyoming or Arizona, as you come around the corner and you see the ranch spread out in front of you. Maybe there's some fields growing silage or growing larger crops, but close to the house you'll find the orchard, you'll find the large, well-manicured and landscaped garden for vegetables, the fruit trees grown near the house. I think it's a great reflection of that shared work and of homesteading and family, and that is a legacy here, not only in Yavapai County, but a legacy that you can see at Sharlot Hall Museum that's reflective of the West and how people, as you said earlier, brought their heritage with them and tried to make it happen and bring that beauty to their town and community, and bring that canopy of green to the desert. And I think that people will experience that when they come to Sharlot Hall Museum.
I think you're right. And I'm glad you mentioned hollyhocks earlier, because hollyhocks, like rhubarb, will grow anywhere. And they're very difficult, in fact, to get rid of if you're not interested in growing hollyhocks and rhubarb. But those are the sorts of things that my grandmother in Ajo was able to grow successfully. So she loved them, planted them wherever she went after that.
Well, Paul, appreciate you being a guest today on Arizona Roundup, and we'll come back this summer and give people an update on the Arboretum, our greenhouse project, and to make sure that they are interested in growing hollyhocks locally that were raised here, maybe all the way back to Sharlot herself, to come into our Bashford house and pick up a packet of hollyhocks and see if they can bring a little bit of the pioneer paths to their own garden here in Arizona.
Excellent idea.
Thank you, Paul. We'll be back next week on Arizona Roundup. We'll look forward to you listening next week. Looking for a fun educational outing? Sharlot Hall Museum isn't just a history display, it's an experience. From the Prescott Indians Art Market to Charlotte's Cellar, living history adventures, author presentations, and lecture series, there's something for everyone. Uncover the past and create new memories today. Visit charlottehallmuseum.org to see our full event lineup. That is charlottehallmuseum.org.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, from the mile-high cowboy city of Prescott, Arizona. Everybody's favorite hometown and the Sharlot Hall Museum. And thank you to Stuart and Paul for that fascinating program about story time and tree time and the Sharlot Hall Museum. We also thank our many sponsors throughout the city. First of all, Helkin and Horn, and of course, Pinion Painting, the True Value Hardware Stores, and Blind Brothers of Arizona. We appreciate their sponsorship and their advocacy for us. Please sponsor them by doing business with them, and when you do, tell them you appreciate their sponsorship of Arizona Roundup. We wish you all the best, and we hope that you can make your way to the program again. By the way, go to charlottehallmuseum.org, charlottehallmuseum.org. Give some recommendations to Stuart. Tell him some of the things that perhaps you could do to help the program. Maybe you have a guest or a program or a story that will help us again celebrate the wonderful Western way of life. And perhaps you even have some of your own stories about Prescott, Arizona. We're always looking for Prescott Press. They are our home. So, all the very best to you. Make sure you come back again for Arizona Roundup. Until that, all the best blessings, good times, do good work, and be back. You hear? Bye for now.